In this video, I'm just going to share with you a realization I got when I was practicing scales. I had this idea when I started out that, people who could play across the fretboard, they would be seeing the whole fretboard as a map, and then they could just freely just navigate instead of having just one shape, right? One vertical. They had like the whole fretboard laid out like that, so they could move effortlessly. That is absolutely not the case with any person. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you why, so we can take some of the frustration and some of the struggling to try to learn something that nobody learns out of it. So stick with me. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and go download our free course if you haven't already done so. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that, with the pentatonic scale, the only reason why we learn these 5 shapes all across the fretboard is so that we can put them together and make them one shape across the whole neck, right? And there's nothing wrong with that project, but what we aim for often determines how much frustration we feel, and also how long it takes to get there and what we need to do. All these things play in. If you have a totally accurate map of what it takes to get to the point you want to go to and how long it's going to take and how many repetitions or how much work, then there's not much frustration, is there? Because then you're absolutely in sync with reality. There's nothing like practicing something for hours, for days, for months, and then never getting to the actual point you want to get to. It feels awful, and it will only strengthen your belief that you can't do it every time that happens. So when it comes to scales, what is really going on? Well, what I thought, as I said, is that I could learn to visualize the whole fretboard. And you can, but it won't help you much, because when you navigate the fretboard, you're always in one place. And so you're taking the next step to the next place, right? You're not seeing the whole fretboard. You're seeing the place you're in, and then you see the place next to it. Once you're in the place next to it, you move on and see the next part of it. So look at it like a tunnel vision, right? You can only see this area, but as you move around, right, you see the other areas next to where you are. And that's really what happens, but there's a lot more to it than that. And then, of course, you can step away, and then you can kind of let your vision glance upon the fretboard. But the same thing happens here, that you look at this part, then you look at that part. You can't really see the whole thing at once, can you? Right? It's like looking at a map of a city where we imagine that taxi drivers in the good old days before the GPS systems, right, they could just visualize the whole city. So you could, because they've been driving around in it for 10 years, right? But so you imagined, or at least I did, that they could just see the map of the city. They knew exactly where things were, but that's not the case. The thing is that whether you learn the whole city and you learn to visualize the map of the city in your head or the fretboard in your head, what happens is that, and please see if you can imagine this or just test it on yourself, that if you're in some part of the city and you have to find your way to another part of the city, you don't visualize the city from above. You visualize the roads you have to take to get to where you want to go. Isn't that true? And because that's how the brain works. So you can have this ambition that I'm going to learn to visualize the whole fretboard, but it never really happens because you never really use it. But as it turns out, every time you navigate, it's by following a road or combining these roads that you create in your mind. So I go there, and then I need to go down here, right? Okay, enough about that. Well, what does that mean to the fretboard? Even though you struggle and you learn the whole freaking pattern across the fretboard, what happens in the end anyway is that you take roads. You take away from here to there. So you move from down here. Yeah, you just build these favorite paths, as I call them, paths across the fretboard, and they become so familiar to you. Why? Because you like taking them. There are, a couple of I have my favorite paths. If I want to go across the fretboard, I always seem to choose 2, 3 of the same paths because they're comfortable, right? And why wouldn't I choose something that's more comfortable than something else? Well, my brain does it all the time. So there's no drawbacks to this. So what we really need to do then, instead of trying to visualize the whole fretboard and working hard to do that, we should instead, as I've been describing in some of my other videos, create paths. There's nothing wrong with learning the vertical systems or the vertical shapes of the pentatonic, the diatonic, the minor, the major, whatever scale, or the diminished, right? Nothing wrong with that. That's pretty cool, visualizing the city, getting that overview, but that's not what happens when you play, because when you play, you got these paths that you move through. So what I suggest you do is that you start creating these paths and then moving into them. Take the same freaking road to work every day until you can do it while thinking about other things, while smoking, drinking, having a conversation with whomever, right? And you just take the same path. It's automatic, just like picking. There's no conscious thought in that. It's automated patterns in my muscles, right? In my muscle memory, as we call it, right? And the same thing goes for the fretboard. It's automated patterns in my memory that I don't have to think about, so I can just play music. But if you say, but I want to play the whole fretboard, I want to play every shape, then just learn more paths. Because that's what works anyway. That's what you're going to do anyway. If you learn the whole fretboard and you start playing, you play with the guys, you play with the band, and you practice, suddenly you realize that after learning the whole freaking fretboard, what you have is 2 or 3 paths across the fretboard in that scale, right? You can go out of them if you want to, but what you're going to use when you improvise and play are these paths. So, and if you don't know what I mean exactly by paths, go back and watch some of the previous videos about the pentatonic scale and how to go horizontal, because what I really mean is just, I used to really like the first position minor pentatonic or the blues scale, and then I fell in love with the 4th position when it comes to phrasing, because it's really comfortable to phrase in these 2 positions. And basically, when I'm playing the pentatonic scale, whenever I'm doing some heavy phrasing, I can do that in any shape, right? But you see, I'm bending with my 4th finger. Don't like that very much. But whenever I play and perform, I'm playing in the 1st and the 4th position when I'm phrasing. When I'm doing runs, I'm connecting the 2 shapes. But I seem to stop and begin all my longer lines, my horizontal/vertical lines, within these 2 shapes because I like them really much, right? That's what happens anyway, even if you know the whole map. So design these paths. See, how am I going to get from the 1st to the 4th position? And you can take any shape that you really like. Just say, okay, I'm just going to do the top 2 strings. Right? And then you just play through those 2 strings, top strings, in the same key, in the same scale, for like 2, 3, 4, 8 weeks. You just stay there, so it becomes so familiar to you, so feels like home, that you don't think about it anymore. You just go back and forth to work all day, right? So it becomes automatic. That's the secret. And as you do that, you might want to study, how are the vertical shapes connected and so on, right? Nothing wrong with that. That's a really cool thing too. But just know that in the end, those paths are what you're going to use, because everybody has a brain that works in that way. So I hope this makes sense to you. But it really, when I got this, I just finally stopped this ambition of being able to look at the fretboard and then, okay, C major scale, okay, C sharp melodic minor, and then just boom, 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 boom. It doesn't happen like that, right? Use the path idea, because that's how your brain works anyway. Hope to see you in the next video.